Hello, grade 9 math students. Welcome to week 4. So today we're going to talk about the equation of a line in terms of how we look at it and how we can write it in different ways. So we have seen the equation of a line many times, and generally we talk about what the general term or form is of the equation of a line. And we've always said that if I was looking for an equation of a line, it's when I have that y equals, right? And we talk about our multiplier, which we say is m, times our x, which is usually our step pattern, plus our constant. So m is our multiplier, but we've also called it slope and rate of change. Those are the three words that we've seen for m. And b is our constant or our y-intercept. Okay, and today really what we're going to focus on is using these words. So m is we're going to talk about a slope, and b we're going to talk about as our y-intercept. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of the equation throughout the lesson today. So what we want to do is I want us to look at these graphs right here. So I've made these tables, these grids, and I want to know what is my slope, what is my y-intercept, and can we make an equation of a line? Can we make a y equals equation? So let's start it here. The easiest thing, the first thing you're always going to find is your y-intercept because it should be the easiest one to find. So my y-intercept is going to be wherever that line crosses the y-axis. And if I'm looking here, my y-intercept is right here. That's where that line is crossing the y-axis. And in case you need a little reminder, my x-axis goes from left to right. My y-axis goes up and down just because it has that stick in the letter, okay? So it's longer. So my y-axis here is my vertical axis, so it's going up and down. And if I'm looking at my line, I see that it's crossing at -5. So my y-intercept here, or my constant, is going to be -5. And now I want to find my slope. So again, you get your y-intercept by looking at the graph. No math needed. Okay. And so my slope, I'm going to pick any two dots on my graph. On my line here. So I want to find 2 points that are in the corner of the boxes. So like here might be a good point because I know that that's right on that line. Okay. And then I'm going to just keep going until I find the next one, which for me is here. You could make a bigger triangle if you want, so pick any 2 points. And we're going to draw our triangle here. Okay. And remember that my slope, if I'm looking for my slope, this is my rise divided by my run. So you need to rise up before you can run forward, right? And so let's look at this. So I need to figure out my rise. So if I'm looking at here, if this is my dot, my first dot, I'm starting at -3 and I'm going up to -1. So I've gone up 2. So my rise here is 2. My run, that's going to be how much I go across, so my side to side. And if I'm looking here, I'm starting at 3, I'm ending at 6. So if I start at 3 and end at 6, that's a change of 3, right? There's 3 spots in between here. So I go 1, 2, 3. That's my run here. So if I'm looking at this, then it looks like my slope is 2/3. And I can see that because if I start at this dot, I'm going to go up 2/3. And now I'm at my next dot on this equation of a line. Okay. So how do I fill this in to this equation? Right? Well, we've been talking about substituting. And I'm telling you that instead of m, I can write the fraction 2/3. The x is going to stay here because I don't have a value for that yet. Plus, and then if I'm looking here, I'm telling you that instead of b, well, that's -5. So instead of a b, I can write -5. Okay, let's simplify this a little bit because I don't like that I have 2 operations side by side like this. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's kind of repetitive. So I'm going to rewrite the first half of this equation, so my 2/3x, And now if I'm looking at this, I have a positive and a negative. And whenever the signs are opposite, that's negative. So I'm going to write subtract 5. And remember that negative and subtract, it's kind of the same thing now, right? So we need to start thinking like that. So I'm really adding negative 5. Well, that's the same as subtracting 5. Okay? So if I'm looking here, if I'm looking at this equation of the line, well, now this is how that's going to translate. So I'm going up 2 over 3. That's what this means. And I'm starting at negative 5. That's my starting point here. I can go lower, I can go higher, but this is my reference point, my y-intercept. Okay, so let's move on to the next example. So we have another line, and again, I want you guys to pause before I do it and see if you can find out some of this information. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look for our y-intercept. We're going to find b, and I look on this y-axis, and I just look to see where this line crosses my y-axis, and that happens to be right here. Okay, so at 3. So my y-intercept here is going to be 3. Now I want to find my slope. So again, I'm going to pick any 2 points on my graph that are going through those corners. So here's one. Here's one. We're going to draw a triangle. Okay. And remember, we said that my slope is my rise over my run. And so I'm going to figure out my rise. So here, if I'm starting at 1 and I'm ending at negative 3, well, I'm actually not rising, I'm going down, and I've gone down by 4. So I'm going to put a negative in front of that because I've gone down. Negative, this means that I've gone down. And if I'm starting at 1 and ending at 3 here, I've gone across 2. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's just make sure that that makes sense. So if I'm starting at here, I go down 1, 2, 3, 4. I go across 1, 2. Okay, that's what this means. So if I'm looking at this slope equation, I see that it's 4 over 2. Well, I know that that's divisible, that I can make that number smaller. In fact, 4 divided by 2, that's going to be 2, and the negative is going to stay there because the negative divided by a positive is still a negative. Okay, so my slope here is actually negative 2, and let's see if that makes sense. So if I start at my 1 here, and I go down 1, 2 over 1, well, that's another point here, so that does make sense. Now, let's see if we can fill this into this equation of a line. My y equals mx plus b. And remember here that the goal is that I'm going to replace only 2 letters. I'm going to replace my m, and I'm going to replace my b. Okay? So instead of an m, I can write negative 2. The x is going to stay the same, plus, and my slope, or my y-intercept here that we found where it crosses the y-axis, that's going to be 3. And I just take a quick gander, and I notice that I have no signs that are beside each other. I don't really need to simplify this anymore. This equation makes me happy. Okay. So now that we can build equations from graphs, let's see if we can work backwards. So if I was given a slope and I was given a y-intercept, just like here, are we able to A, write the equation of a line, and then can we graph it? So let's take a look at writing the equation of a line. So really, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this one so our focus is here. If I want to write the equation of a line, I'm just going to do exactly what we were doing in the previous examples, and I'm going to fill in this blanket equation that we have. And like we said, we're going to replace our m and our b here. Okay? And actually, why don't I use different colors just in case you're a little bit confused. So my m, we're telling you, is 3 over 5. So I'm saying instead of an m, we can actually replace that or substitute it with 3 over 4. And my b, I'm telling you that instead of writing b, well, we can write negative 2 instead. So let's try that. So instead of an m, I'm writing 3 over 4. My x is going to stay in my equation, plus negative 2. And so again, we're just going to take a quick little gander here, and I notice that I do have 2 signs side by side, so I'm going to fix that. I only want 1 sign, so I'm going to rewrite everything else. And a positive and a negative, well, that makes a negative sign, so it's really subtract 2 here, or negative 2. Okay, so my equation of a line here is going to look like y equals 3 over 4x minus 2. So how do we graph this? Like, what's our first step here? And if you remember from class, our first step is always to graph the y-intercept first. So that b value or a constant first. And in this case, my y-intercept is -2. So I'm going to go on my y-axis here, which is my vertical axis, up and down. And I'm going to keep going along until I find -2, which is right here. And I'm going to plot a point. Okay, so I'm going to put a dot right on that axis. Okay, so there's my dot. And now I'm going to use my slope to help me find my next point. So use slope to find your next point. So what I mean here is that we can actually use our formula. Remember, fractions are just as easy to calculate my next point. So remember, my rise or my slope is the same as saying rise over run. So really, I'm telling you in this fraction here that my rise is 3, my run is 4. Okay, so here, if I'm starting at -2, if my rise is 3, I'm going to go up 3 dots. 1, 2, 3 over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to draw a dot. So up 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to do that one more time from my blue dot so that now I have 3 dots, and then I can make a straight line with a ruler. So I'm going to go again, up 1, 2, 3 over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And now, using a ruler, you're going to draw a straight line. And remember, you're going to use a ruler. I tried my very best here on my iPad, but it's a little difficult. But once this is done, you can label this as y equals 3 over 4x minus 2. Or you may not need to label it if there's only one line in the equation here. And so then we move on. And try to extend your line just like I just did, but you actually use the ruler so that it fills the whole graph. Okay? So our last step there is to draw your line with a ruler. And notice here now that I'm drawing solid lines. This is not a step. I can have in between numbers, like even if I'm looking here, right, I have a dot. Sorry, you can't see. Why is this not working? Okay, well, there's a dot at 4 and 1. But if I'm looking here, I can have a step at 5, okay? So connect points with a ruler. Okay, so you're going to connect your points with the ruler. And basically that's how we do this. So I want you guys to pause and see if you can kind of draw this next example. Remember that you're going to start with your y-intercept, and then you're going to look at your slope. So we can start, I'll start you off by, so pause the video and see if you can do it. We're going to write our equation of a line here. So it's y equals mx plus b, okay? And instead of an m, I'm telling you that you can write -3. And instead of a b, I'm telling you that you can write a 0. Now you can leave this plus 0 here, or the more correct way as grade you move on in math is just going to get rid of the 0. So we're going to leave it as y equals -3x. So remember here that this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis, and I'm wanting to plot my y-intercept first. So I'm going to go along my y-intercept until I see 0 on here, which is right here, and I'm going to plot that number. So I draw my point right at 0. It's right where the two axes meet. Sorry, it's a little messy. My stylus died. So now that I have that point, let's look at the slope. So we said that the slope is -3. And if I were to write -3 as a fraction, that's -3 over 1. And what does this mean? Well, this means that I'm going to end up going down 3 across 1. Okay, so from my point here, I'm going to go down 3 across 1. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and over 1. Okay, sorry, over 1. Had a brain fart. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . It's almost like I back in class and I'm not getting anything working properly. So again, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3 because we have to do it twice over another one. Draw another dot. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it should look something like this. And using a ruler now, you're going to connect the lines. I don't have a ruler, so I'm not going to embarrass myself by doing it. Maybe I can do it just like this. Okay, and you're going to extend the line again so that it fits the whole graph. So this is basically what we wanted to talk about today. I want to talk to you guys about how we can kind of see the equation of a line. And then this week, we're going to talk about how we can rearrange the equation of the line and how we can get some information from it. So that's the overview of the lesson today. Be sure to click on the worksheet and work on the problems. If you have any questions, write them in that Google Doc and I will answer them as soon as I see them. I hope that you guys are doing well and staying safe and that you know that you are missed. Have a great day, everybody.